When Madison Brooks and her crew cornered the quiet new girl at the top of Westfield High's main staircase, they thought they were about to deliver the ultimate humiliation that would cement their reign over the school's social hierarchy. What they didn't know was that Emma Chen had spent 8 years mastering one of the most brutal forms of karate on the planet, and their attempted assault was about to become a lesson in physics, precision, and the dangerous consequences of underestimating someone based on their appearance. What happened next in those terrifying seconds would be captured on security cameras, witnessed by dozens of students, and transform everything anyone thought they knew about power, respect, and the price of cruelty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma Chen stood at her new locker, carefully arranging her textbooks with the methodical precision that had become second nature after years of military family relocations. The hallways of Westfield High School buzzed with the familiar chaos of students navigating between classes, their voices echoing off polished floors and cream-colored walls adorned with banners celebrating academic achievements and athletic victories. The Colorado mountain air drifted through open windows, carrying the crisp scent of autumn leaves and the distant sound of construction from the expanding suburbs of Maplewood. At 17, Emma possessed the kind of understated presence that allowed her to blend seamlessly into new environments, a skill developed through countless moves as her father climbed the ranks of the Air Force. Her black hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and her lean frame was typically concealed beneath loose-fitting clothes that gave no indication of the steel cable muscles beneath. She had learned long ago that drawing attention in new schools often led to complications, and her preference was to observe, adapt, and find her place gradually rather than making dramatic first impressions. Westfield High School represented the fifth educational institution Emma had attended in her 17 years, and she had developed a keen eye for reading the social dynamics that govern teenage hierarchies. The school itself was impressive, a modern facility serving nearly 2,000 students from Maplewood's diverse community of military families, longtime residents, and the growing population of professionals drawn to Colorado's booming tech sector. The building's architecture reflected the community's aspirations, with soaring ceilings, abundant natural light, and state-of-the-art facilities that spoke to both academic excellence and athletic achievement. The student body moved through the hallways with the confidence of young people who understood their place in the world, their conversations flowing between weekend plans, college applications, and the endless drama of teenage relationships. Emma observed the familiar patterns that existed in every high school she had attended, the invisible lines that separated different social groups, and the unspoken rules that governed interactions between students of varying status and influence. The main staircase served as the school's central hub, a wide marble expanse that connected the academic wings to the administrative offices and provided a natural gathering place for students between classes. The staircase's prominence made it a stage for the daily theater of high school social dynamics, where chance encounters could elevate or destroy reputations, and where the most significant moments of teenage drama often unfolded under the observation of hundreds of witnesses. Emma had been attending Westfield for exactly 2 weeks, long enough to complete the enrollment paperwork and begin understanding the academic expectations, but not long enough to form meaningful relationships or establish her place within the school's complex social ecosystem. Her classes were challenging but manageable, her teachers were professional and supportive, and her fellow students were generally polite in the way that characterized interactions with newcomers who had not yet been categorized as threats or opportunities. The Chen family had moved to Maplewood when Emma's father, Colonel David Chen, had been assigned to the nearby Air Force Base as part of a joint training program with civilian aerospace contractors. The assignment represented a significant step forward in his career, But it also meant another upheaval for Emma during her crucial senior year. Her mother, Dr. Sarah Chun, had secured a position at the local hospital, and the family had purchased a modest home in one of Maplewood's newer subdivisions, hoping that this move might finally provide the stability that had been elusive throughout Emma's childhood. What none of her new classmates knew, what no one at Westfield High could have guessed from her quiet demeanor and academic focus, was that Emma Chen had spent the last 8 years of her life mastering Kyokushin karate under the guidance of some of the most demanding instructors in the martial arts world. Her training had begun at age 9, when her parents had enrolled her in classes as a way to provide consistency and discipline during their frequent relocations. What had started as a practical solution to the challenges of military family life had evolved into something far more profound. Kyokushin, known as the ultimate truth in karate, was renowned for its emphasis on full-contact sparring, conditioning exercises that bordered on brutal, and a philosophy that demanded absolute commitment to excellence. Unlike the more commercialized martial arts programs that focused primarily on forms and belt advancement, Kyokushin training was designed to forge warriors capable of defending themselves and others in real-world situations. Emma's instructors had been former champions and military combat specialists who understood that true martial arts mastery required not just physical technique, but mental discipline, emotional control, and the wisdom to know when violence was necessary and when it was not. Her training had taken her to dojos across the country and around the world, wherever her father's assignments had led the family. She had studied under masters in Okinawa, trained with Olympic competitors in California, and competed in tournaments that had tested her skills against some of the most talented young martial artists in North America. Her collection of trophies and medals remained carefully packed in boxes in her new bedroom, hidden away like the rest of her extraordinary background. The decision to keep her martial arts expertise private was deliberate and carefully considered. Emma had learned through experience that her skills could intimidate classmates, attract unwanted attention from those seeking to test themselves against her abilities, or create expectations that she preferred to avoid. Her goal was to complete her senior year quietly, maintain her grades, and prepare for college applications without the complications that often accompanied being known as the girl who could fight. As Emma organized her afternoon schedule and prepared for her next class, she remained unaware that her carefully maintained anonymity was about to be shattered by students who had already begun to view her as a target for their entertainment. The undisputed queen of Westfield High School's social hierarchy was Madison Brooks, a 17-year-old senior whose influence extended far beyond the traditional boundaries of teenage popularity. Madison possessed the kind of effortless beauty that made other girls simultaneously envious and desperate for her approval. With honey blonde hair that caught the light perfectly, and green eyes that could shift from warm charm to cold calculation in seconds. Her father owned the largest construction company in Maplewood, responsible for building many of the upscale developments that had transformed the once quiet mountain town into a thriving suburban community. And her mother served on the school board while managing a successful real estate agency that catered to wealthy newcomers seeking Colorado's outdoor lifestyle. Madison's wardrobe consisted entirely of designer pieces that technically complied with Westfield's dress code while managing to look exponentially more expensive and sophisticated than anything her classmates could afford. She had mastered the art of appearing effortlessly perfect, from her professionally styled hair to her subtle but flawless makeup that enhanced her natural features without appearing overdone. Her social media presence boasted tens of thousands of followers who hung on her every post, eager to glimpse the lifestyle that represented their aspirations and dreams. What made Madison truly dangerous was not her wealth or beauty, but her intelligence and strategic thinking when it came to social manipulation. She understood instinctively how to read people's insecurities and desires, using that knowledge to build alliances, destroy enemies, and maintain her position at the apex. of the school's complex social pyramid. Her cruelty was never random or impulsive but calculated and purposeful, designed to achieve specific objectives while maintaining plausible deniability about her intentions. Tyler Santos, Madison's boyfriend of 2 years, served as both her most devoted follower and her primary enforcement mechanism when situations required physical intimidation rather than social pressure. At 18, Tyler had the kind of athletic build that came from years of dedicated training in multiple sports, with broad shoulders, defined muscles, and the confident stride of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. He was the star quarterback of Westfield's football team, which had won 3 consecutive state championships under his leadership, and his combination of athletic achievement and natural charisma had made him a local celebrity throughout Maplewood. Tyler's family had deep roots in the community, with his grandfather having founded the successful chain of automotive dealerships that bore the Santos name, and his father continuing the business while expanding into real estate development and local politics. The Santos family's influence extended throughout the region, providing Tyler with connections and opportunities that reinforced his sense of entitlement and invincibility. His relationship with Madison was viewed by many as the perfect union of athletic achievement and social prominence, a partnership that seemed destined to continue long after graduation. Despite his public image as a clean-cut athlete and community leader, Tyler possessed a darker side that emerged when he felt his authority was challenged, or when Madison required his support in maintaining her dominance. He had a history of using his physical presence to intimidate classmates who dared to cross him or his girlfriend, always careful to stop just short of actions that might attract serious consequences from school administrators or law enforcement. Jessica Rodriguez completed the inner circle as Madison's closest confidant and the group's primary chronicler through her extensive social media presence. At 16, Jessica had built a following of over 50,000 across various platforms. By documenting the exclusive lifestyle and dramatic events that surrounded Madison's circle, her content ranged from fashion advice and lifestyle tips to carefully edited glimpses of the parties, events, and social dynamics that defined Westfield's elite social scene. Jessica's role in the group extended beyond simple documentation. She served as Madison's intelligence gatherer and propaganda minister, using her digital platforms to elevate allies and destroy enemies through strategic content creation and viral campaigns. Her ability to capture the perfect angle, craft the ideal caption, and time posts for maximum impact had made her an invaluable asset to Madison's social empire while building her own brand as an influencer and content creator. The Rodriguez family had moved to Maplewood 5 years earlier when Jessica's mother had been hired as the head of marketing for a major ski resort, and Jessica had quickly recognized that her path to popularity lay in aligning herself with the established power structure rather than challenging it. Her natural talent for photography and social media marketing had provided her with unique value within Madison's circle, earning her protection and status that her family's middle-class background might not have otherwise afforded. Ryan Parker brought a different kind of energy to the group as the designated entertainer whose quick wit and willingness to push boundaries provided much of the humor and excitement that kept their followers engaged. At 17, Ryan possessed the kind of sharp intelligence that could have made him successful in academic or creative pursuits, but he had chosen instead to focus his talents on social manipulation and the creation of viral moments that enhanced the group's reputation for unpredictability and excitement. Ryan's family situation was more complicated than those of his friends, with his parents having divorced acrimoniously when he was 14 and his father having relocated to Denver for work, leaving Ryan to live with his mother in a modest apartment. That stood in stark contrast to the mansions and luxury homes of his social circle. His inclusion in Madison's group was based on his entertainment value and his willingness to take risks that others avoided. But his precarious financial situation made him desperate to maintain his position and more willing than the others to escalate situations beyond reasonable limits. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sophia Williams rounded out the core group as the quiet enabler, whose family's extreme wealth provided resources and opportunities that even Madison's substantial means could not match. The Williams family had made their fortune in tech investments before relocating to Colorado for the lifestyle and privacy that money could buy. And Sophia's trust fund contained more money than most families would see in multiple lifetimes. Her role in the group was primarily financial, providing funding for elaborate schemes, exclusive events, and the kind of experiences that cemented their status as Westfield's ultimate insiders. Despite her financial contributions, Sophia rarely took leadership roles in the group's activities, preferring to observe and enable rather than directing or participating directly in their more aggressive social campaigns. Her quiet demeanor masked a keen intelligence and a thorough understanding of how power worked in their environment, but she had chosen to exercise her influence through financial support rather than personal confrontation. The 5 students had formed their alliance during their freshman year, recognizing that their combined resources, talents, and family connections could create a level of influence that none of them could achieve individually. Over the past 3 years, they had refined their tactics and expanded their reach until they effectively controlled most aspects of Westfield's social environment, from determining which students were accepted into popular groups to influencing everything from homecoming court selections to party invitations. Their power was exercised through a combination of inclusion and exclusion, reward and punishment, always calibrated to maintain their position while avoiding consequences that might threaten their status or future opportunities. They had learned to operate within the boundaries of school rules and social expectations, while maximizing their ability to shape the experiences of their classmates according to their preferences and whims. The group's latest target had emerged, naturally from their ongoing need to demonstrate their power and provide entertainment for their followers and admirers throughout Westfield. Emma Chen's arrival as a new student during senior year had presented them with an opportunity to reassert their dominance while creating content that would reinforce their reputation for creativity and boldness in dealing with potential threats to their established order. Madison had been observing Emma for the 2 weeks since her enrollment, noting her quiet demeanor, her tendency to avoid social situations, and her apparent lack of connections or allies within the school. To Madison's calculating mind, Emma represented the perfect target for a demonstration of power that would be both entertaining and instructive for the broader student body, showing once again that crossing the established hierarchy carried consequences that newcomers would be wise to understand and respect. What Madison Brooks and her carefully curated circle could never have imagined was that the quiet new girl they had marked for humiliation possessed skills that could disable trained fighters in seconds and a background that made their teenage social games look like children playing with toys. Emma Chen's journey into the world of Kyokushin karate had begun 8 years earlier, when her parents had sought a way to provide stability and discipline during the constant upheaval of military family life. But it had evolved into something far more profound than anyone could have anticipated. Emma's first karate instructor had been Master Takeshi Yamamoto, a 70-year-old Okinawan grandmaster who had relocated to California to teach authentic martial arts to serious students, rather than the watered-down versions that dominated most commercial dojos. Master Yamamoto had survived the brutal training methods of post-war Japan, where karate was taught as a life-or-death skill rather than a recreational activity, and he brought that same intensity and authenticity to his small dojo in San Diego, where 9-year-old Emma had first encountered the true meaning of martial arts discipline. The initial months of training had been unlike anything Emma had experienced in her young life. Master Yamamoto's teaching methods included conditioning exercises that left her knuckles bleeding and her shins covered in bruises, meditation sessions that lasted for hours in uncomfortable positions, and sparring sessions where showing weakness or giving up resulted in additional training rather than sympathy. The dojo operated according to principles that had been unchanged for centuries, where respect was earned through dedication and perseverance rather than given freely, and where every technique had to be proven effective against resisting opponents. Emma's natural athleticism and competitive spirit had served her well during those early years, but it was her mental toughness and willingness to endure pain that had caught Master Yamamoto's attention. Unlike many of the other students who train for fitness or self-confidence, Emma displayed the kind of determination and focus that marked potential champions, pushing herself through grueling workouts and complex techniques with an intensity that impressed even the most demanding instructors. When Colonel Chun had received orders transferring the family to Hawaii, Master Yamamoto had provided Emma with letters of introduction to Sensei Robert Kawakami, a former world champion who operated a traditional dojo in Honolulu that maintained the highest standards of technical excellence and competitive achievement. Sensei Kawakami had been skeptical about accepting a 10-year-old student with only 18 months of training, but Master Yamamoto's recommendation carried enormous weight in the international Kyokushin community, and Emma's demonstration of basic techniques had convinced him that she possessed exceptional potential. The Hawaii training had introduced Emma to the competitive aspects of Kyokushin that went far beyond basic self-defense or physical fitness. Sensei Kawakami's dojo attracted serious martial artists from throughout the Pacific region, including active military personnel, law enforcement officers, and professional fighters who used traditional karate training to supplement their modern combat skills. Emma found herself training alongside Navy SEALs, Marine Force reconnaissance operators, and civilian competitors who had dedicated their lives to martial arts excellence. The intensity of this environment had accelerated Emma's development in ways that would have been impossible in a typical martial arts school. Her training partners included adults who possessed decades of experience in both competition and real-world combat, and they had taught her lessons that extended far beyond formal techniques. She learned to read opponents' intentions through subtle changes in posture and breathing, to exploit weaknesses that appeared for fractions of seconds during exchanges, and to maintain absolute composure under pressure that would overwhelm most people. Emma's first major tournament victory had come at age 12, when she had competed in the junior division of the Hawaii State Kyokushin Championships and defeated opponents who had been training longer and possessed superior technical knowledge. Her success had been based not on flashy techniques or superior athleticism, but on her ability to absorb punishment while systematically breaking down her opponent's defenses through precise, powerful strikes delivered with perfect timing. The family's next military transfer had taken them to North Carolina, where Emma had continued her training under Sensei Maria Gonzalez, a former Pan American champion who had pioneered the integration of traditional Kyokushin techniques with modern sports science and conditioning methods. Sensei Gonzalez's dojo attracted elite athletes from multiple disciplines, and Emma had found herself training alongside Olympic judoka, professional MMA fighters, and special operations personnel, who used her facility to maintain their combat readiness. Under Sensei Gonzalez's guidance, Emma had learned to combine the traditional power and conditioning of Kyokushin with more sophisticated strategies for reading opponents and exploiting tactical advantages. Her training had expanded to include weapons forms, multiple attacker scenarios, and defensive tactics that went far beyond sport competition into the realm of practical self-defense and personal protection. Emma's competition record during her teenage years had been extraordinary by any measure. She had won regional championships in 3 different states, placed in the top 5 at 2 national tournaments, and had been selected for the United States. junior team that competed in international events against the best young martial artists from around the world. Her success had attracted attention from college recruiters and professional fighting organizations, but her focus had remained on personal development and technical excellence rather than fame or financial reward. The most significant aspect of Emma's martial arts education had been the philosophical and mental training that accompanied the physical techniques. Kyokushin tradition emphasized that true martial arts mastery required not just the ability to defeat opponents, but the wisdom to avoid unnecessary conflicts and the character to use one's skills only in defense of oneself or others who could not protect themselves. Emma had been taught that her abilities carried profound responsibilities, and that the true test of a martial artist was not how many fights they could win, but how many fights they could prevent through presence, confidence, and de-escalation. Her instructors had emphasized repeatedly that the most dangerous opponents were often those who appeared least threatening, and that underestimating others based on their appearance or demeanor was a mistake that could prove fatal in real-world situations. These lessons had shaped Emma's approach to social interactions as much as her fighting strategy, teaching her to observe carefully, react proportionally, and never reveal her capabilities unless absolutely necessary. The decision to keep her martial arts background private at each new school had been a conscious choice, based on years of experience with how people reacted to her abilities. Some students became afraid of her, others tried to test themselves against her skills, and many teachers and administrators became overly cautious about normal teenage interactions once they learned about her competitive achievements. Emma had discovered that anonymity provided her with freedom to develop normal relationships and focus on academics without the complications that accompanied being known as the girl who could fight. Her training had continued even during the family's most recent relocation to Colorado, where Emma had found a small traditional dojo operated by Sensei David Kim, a former military combat instructor who maintained the old-school approach to martial arts that emphasized practical application over commercial appeal. Sensei Kim's students included active-duty military personnel from the nearby Air Force Base, local law enforcement officers, and serious civilian practitioners who trained for personal protection rather than tournament competition. The skills Emma had developed over 8 years of intensive training went far beyond simple fighting techniques. She had learned to assess threats instantly, to read body language and recognize aggressive intentions before they became actions, and to respond to attacks with precisely calibrated force that neutralized threats while minimizing unnecessary harm. Her reflexes had been honed through thousands of hours of sparring against skilled opponents. Her conditioning had been developed through training methods that pushed human endurance to its limits, and her mental discipline had been forged through meditation and philosophical study that taught her to remain calm and focused under extreme pressure. Perhaps most importantly, Emma had learned to recognize when violence was truly necessary and when it could be avoided through other means. Her instructors had taught her that the highest level of martial arts skill was demonstrated not by defeating opponents, but by resolving conflicts without fighting whenever possible. This wisdom had guided her interactions with classmates at previous schools, allowing her to navigate social challenges without revealing her extraordinary capabilities. As Emma moved through the hallways of Westfield High School, observing the familiar patterns of teenage social dynamics while focusing on her academic responsibilities, she remained completely unaware that Madison Brooks and her followers were planning an encounter that would test every aspect of her training and force her to make split-second decisions that would forever change her carefully maintained anonymity. The subtle campaign against Emma Chen had begun during her first week at Westfield High School, though she had been too focused on adjusting to her new academic environment to recognize the warning signs that more socially attuned students would have immediately identified. Madison Brooks possessed an almost supernatural ability to orchestrate social pressure campaigns that escalated gradually, allowing her to gauge her target's responses while maintaining plausible deniability about her intentions and creating situations that appeared coincidental to outside observers. Emma's first encounter with Madison's influence had occurred during lunch on her third day at Westfield, when she had approached a table of students who appeared friendly and welcoming only to have them suddenly remember urgent commitments that required them to leave immediately after she sat down. The exodus had been so obviously coordinated that even Emma's limited experience with high school social dynamics had recognized it as deliberate exclusion, but she had attributed it to typical new student challenges rather than organized harassment. Similar incidents had occurred with increasing frequency throughout her first 2 weeks at the school. Study group invitations that were mysteriously withdrawn at the last minute, project partnerships that dissolved without explanation, and casual conversations that ended abruptly when she approached had created a pattern of isolation that might have devastated a less resilient student. Emma's military background had given her experience with adapting to hostile environments, but the subtle nature of the social warfare being waged against her made it difficult to identify specific perpetrators or develop effective countermeasures. The escalation had been so gradual that Emma had initially dismissed each incident as coincidence or misunderstanding, attributing the social difficulties to her own failure to adapt properly to Westfield's unique culture rather than recognizing them as symptoms of a coordinated campaign. Her natural tendency to avoid drawing attention to herself had worked against her in this situation, preventing her from seeking help from teachers or administrators who might have recognized the patterns and intervened before the situation deteriorated. Further, Madison's strategy had been particularly insidious because it relied on the cooperation of students who were not part of her inner circle but who understood that crossing her could result in similar treatment being directed toward them. A whispered warning about Emma being weird or antisocial was enough to make most students avoid interaction with her, while casual comments about her family being military people who don't understand how things work here created additional barriers to social integration. The psychological warfare had extended beyond simple exclusion into more active forms of harassment that remained just subtle enough to avoid detection by school authorities. Emma's locker had been repeatedly blocked by groups of students having animated conversations that prevented her access, forcing her to wait until they finished their discussions or ask them to move aside, creating awkward interactions that reinforced her status as an outsider who disrupted the natural flow of social activity. Her participation in classroom discussions had been met with eye rolls, whispered comments, and other nonverbal responses that signaled disapproval without crossing the line into behavior that teachers would address directly. The cumulative effect of these seemingly minor incidents had been to create an atmosphere where Emma felt constantly scrutinized and unwelcome, despite her attempts to remain focused on her academic responsibilities and avoid social complications. Jessica Rodriguez had documented many of these interactions through carefully angled photos and videos that never quite showed the harassment directly but captured Emma's reactions to the social pressure, creating content that portrayed her as awkward, antisocial, and unable to fit in with Westfield's supposedly welcoming community. The documentation served multiple purposes, providing entertainment for Jessica's followers while creating a record that could be used to justify future escalation by showing that Emma was already having difficulties adapting to the school environment. Ryan Parker had contributed to the campaign through his talent for creating situations that appeared accidental but were actually designed to embarrass or inconvenience Emma in public settings. His specialty was engineering moments of physical comedy that made her appear clumsy or awkward, such as accidentally bumping into her while she carried a full tray in the cafeteria, or asking her questions in crowded hallways that she couldn't answer without appearing rude or antisocial. Tyler Santos had played a more subtle role in the harassment, using his status as a popular athlete to influence other students' perceptions of Emma through casual comments about her unfriendliness or failure to participate in school spirit activities. His endorsement of Madison's campaign had been crucial in securing cooperation from students who might otherwise have been neutral or even sympathetic to the new girl's situation. Sophia Williams had provided logistical support for the various schemes while maintaining her usual low profile, ensuring that the group had resources and alibis for their activities while avoiding any direct involvement that might compromise her reputation or create problems with school administrators. Her role as the quiet enabler had been essential to the campaign's success, but it had also insulated her from potential consequences if their activities were discovered. The harassment had begun affecting Emma's academic performance and emotional well-being in ways that she was reluctant to acknowledge, even to herself. Her concentration during classes had suffered as she found herself constantly scanning for potential threats or preparing for the next incident, and her sleep quality had deteriorated as she mentally rehearsed responses to social situations that seemed increasingly unpredictable and hostile. Emma's training in situational awareness had made her conscious of the coordinated nature of the harassment, but her lack of experience with this particular type of social warfare had left her uncertain about how to respond effectively. The techniques that worked in martial arts competitions or self-defense scenarios were not applicable to situations involving psychological pressure and social manipulation, and her philosophy of avoiding unnecessary conflicts seemed inadequate. When the conflicts were being imposed upon her regardless of her preferences, the isolation had been particularly difficult because it reminded Emma of the loneliness she had experienced during previous family relocations, when she had struggled to form connections before being forced to move again. The pattern of constantly adapting to new environments while maintaining emotional distance had served her well in many ways, but it had also made her vulnerable to exactly the kind of sustained social pressure that Madison's group specialized in applying. Emma's parents had noticed changes in her behavior and mood, but their focus on establishing themselves in new careers and their assumption that teenage social difficulties were temporary and manageable had prevented them from recognizing the severity of the situation. Emma's reluctance to burden them with problems she felt she should be able to handle independently had further complicated their ability to provide appropriate support or intervention. The escalating harassment had created a dangerous dynamic, where Emma's natural resilience and self-reliance were being systematically undermined by opponents who understood exactly how to exploit the social vulnerabilities of isolated teenagers. Madison's group had identified Emma's desire to avoid attention as a weakness that could be used against her, creating situations where any response she made would either increase her isolation or provide additional ammunition for future harassment. The psychological pressure had begun manifesting in physical symptoms that Emma recognized from her martial arts training as signs of chronic stress and hypervigilance. Her appetite had decreased, her reaction times had become slightly delayed due to mental fatigue, and she had begun experiencing the kind of muscle tension that indicated her body was preparing for conflict, even when her conscious mind was focused on academic tasks. The situation had reached a critical point where Emma's carefully constructed anonymity was becoming a liability rather than an asset, preventing her from accessing the social support systems that might have helped her navigate the hostile environment, while leaving her increasingly vulnerable to escalation from opponents who interpreted her restraint as weakness rather than strength. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would force Emma to choose between continuing to absorb the harassment or revealing capabilities that would forever change her relationship with the Westfield High School community. The final escalation began on a crisp October morning when Madison Brooks decided that subtle psychological warfare was no longer sufficient to achieve her objectives. The new girl's apparent immunity to social pressure had begun to undermine Madison's reputation for being able to control any situation through strategic manipulation, and several members of her extended social network had started questioning whether Emma Chen might actually be stronger than they had initially assumed. This perceived challenge to Madison's authority could not be allowed to stand, particularly with homecoming approaching and the need to demonstrate clear dominance over potential threats to the established order. Madison's inner circle had gathered in the student parking lot before school began, their luxury vehicles forming a small enclave that served as both status symbol and private meeting space. The conversation had quickly turned to the Emma problem and the need for a more direct approach that would settle the matter definitively, while providing the kind of dramatic content that Jessica's followers had come to expect from their exclusive access to Westfield's social elite. Tyler Santos had been the first to suggest that perhaps Emma's resilience stemmed from her failure to understand the serious consequences of continuing to ignore their social guidance, and that a more memorable lesson might be necessary to help her recognize the importance of accepting her place in the school's hierarchy. His athletic background had made him confident in his ability to intimidate through physical presence without crossing lines that might attract unwanted attention from school administrators. Ryan Parker had immediately recognized the entertainment potential of a more confrontational approach, envisioning scenarios that would provide maximum dramatic impact while maintaining the appearance of accidental encounters rather than premeditated harassment. His creativity in engineering seemingly spontaneous moments of humiliation had made him eager to design something that would finally break through Emma's frustrating composure. Jessica Rodriguez had been enthusiastic about the content creation opportunities that a more dramatic confrontation would provide, particularly if it could be captured on video and edited into the kind of viral moment that significantly boosted engagement across her various social media platforms. Her followers had been expecting increasingly exciting content as homecoming week approached, and the resolution of the Emma situation could provide exactly the kind of exclusive drama that kept audiences engaged. Sophia Williams had expressed some concerns about potential consequences if their activities escalated beyond psychological pressure, but her objections had been overcome by the group's collective confidence in their ability to manage any fallout through family connections and strategic damage control. Her financial resources remained available for whatever cleanup might be necessary after achieving their primary objective of establishing clear dominance. The plan that emerged from their discussion was elegantly simple and brutally effective. Emma's daily routine included a predictable path from her morning classes to her locker near the main staircase, and the timing of her movements had been carefully observed and documented over the past 2 weeks. The main staircase itself provided an ideal location for the kind of accident that would be both humiliating and potentially dangerous, particularly if it could be engineered to appear as though Emma's own clumsiness was responsible for whatever injury she sustained. Madison's strategy called for the group to position themselves strategically throughout the staircase area during the transition between third and fourth periods, when student traffic was heaviest and the chances of finding witnesses who might interfere were minimized. Tyler would create the initial physical contact that started Emma's fall, while Ryan would ensure that she continued tumbling down the stairs by blocking any attempt to regain her balance. Jessica would document the entire sequence from an angle that captured Emma's humiliation, while protecting the group from any suggestion of deliberate assault. The beauty of the plan lay in its deniability and the way it exploited Emma's own apparent reluctance to defend herself or seek help from authority figures. Even if she survived the fall with minor injuries, the public humiliation of tumbling down the school's most prominent staircase while other students watched and laughed would effectively end any question about her status within Westfield's social hierarchy. The incident would be remembered as proof that some people simply didn't belong in their elevated community, regardless of their family's military connections or their own academic achievements. The group had spent considerable time discussing the optimal timing and positioning for their operation, with Madison insisting on precision that would ensure success while minimizing their exposure to serious consequences. Her experience with social manipulation had taught her that the most effective attacks were those that appeared to emerge naturally from existing circumstances rather than obvious premeditation. And she was determined that Emma's downfall would seem like the inevitable result of her own failure to adapt to Westfield's social environment. As the morning progressed and the time for their carefully orchestrated encounter approached, Madison's confidence had grown into anticipation of the moment when Emma Chen would finally understand the consequences of refusing to acknowledge the natural order that governed their school community. The quiet new girl who had somehow resisted weeks of psychological pressure was about to learn that some lessons could only be taught through direct, physical demonstration of power dynamics that she had been foolish enough to ignore. The main staircase of Westfield High School was about to become the stage for a confrontation that would reveal truths about power, consequence, and the dangerous assumptions that people make when they believe themselves to be predators rather than prey. Madison Brooks and her carefully cultivated circle of followers were preparing to discover that their target possessed capabilities that would transform their planned moment of triumph into a demonstration of why appearances could be fatally deceiving. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.